McHenry. I'm Keith McHenry, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Food Not Bombs movement. And in 1988, we had started a second chapter in San Francisco, and we got arrested on August 15th of '88. And there were 94 arrests that in 4 weeks. And then it turned out that we ended up getting a memo from where my home phone was wiretapped on September 27th of '88, and they were talking about this protest I was going to attend, and they were claiming I had 3,000 people, I was going to take over an army base and all this stuff. Well then, when we went to the protest, which was a protest against the war in El Salvador, there was a man dressed just like me who lifted up a police barricade, tossed it at the line of riot police, and then about an hour later I get arrested and beaten and charged with throwing the barricades at the riot police. And it's not, I don't get these internal San Francisco police wiretap memos for several years later, but it becomes clear that this whole thing was planned. But then Thanksgiving that same year in '88, all these people started coming back to me after Thanksgiving vacation and saying, well, we were at the airport and a National Guards person was there. They saw the Food Not Bombs button on a person's coat, and they go, oh, we just studied them in domestic terrorism school. That's America's most hardcore terrorist group. So that's okay. Thanksgiving of '88.
That's in '88. Now, what actually does Food Not Bombs do?
So what we do now and what we did in '88 is we collect food that can't be sold, and we make it into meals, vegetarian meals that we hand out on the streets to the hungry. And we do take food, like to that protest on October 15th against the war in El Salvador, and we feed the protesters.
And how many Occupy camps have you gone and fed people at?
Well, I myself have personally fed people at 15, and I've slept at 15 occupations. And by phone, I have helped talk people through organizing the food, and probably another 20 or 30. And then probably another 20 or 30 I communicated by email to occupations about organizing the food. In fact, I ended up making a website on how to organize a kitchen and collect the food and make sure everybody has food. I have it in lots of 500, like how to make 500 meals per occupation.
And that website address is?
That's foodnotbombs.net.
Right.
It's on the cover of it, the front page, foodnotbombs.net. It says how to organize a kitchen.
Okay, so what you're saying is since 1988, Food Not Bombs, our government, has thought you were a terrorist organization for feeding people, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and so...
you know what, there was recently, just to give a a lot has happened. We have over 15 prisoners in prison right now. A friend of mine, Eric McDavid's doing 20 years in federal prison in Southern California. The thing that he did was he helped me organize a Food Not Bombs gathering in Philadelphia, where activists from all over the East Coast came and discussed how to do protesting, how to make decisions by consensus, how to make lots of food, that kind of thing. And so during that, after that, he went on vacation. He turned out he went on vacation with an informant. And that informant had been hustling him for several years, and she had disrupted a bunch of things. I'd had an uncomfortable experience with her when she was like kind of attacking me verbally in New York City at the Republican National Convention there in 2004. And it turned out she was paid $65,000 to join Food Not Bombs and to become lovers with Eric and to try to frame him. They targeted him because they said a lot of other young Food Not Bombs people really respected him and they needed to make an example of him, is what the prosecuting attorney said.
So that's why he's a political prisoner today?
Correct. That's why he refused to. So the informant, Anna, tried to get him and two other friends of mine, Zachary and Ren, to bomb a dam on the Sacramento River, and they refused. Eventually, after months of the government trying to get them to do it, they decided that they came up with a different plan. They suggested that she was about to get discovered by Eric and Ren and Zachary, and therefore harm her as an informant. So they rushed in to save her life with a SWAT team and all this stuff, and took them out. Then they turned out Ren was in love with Eric, so they pitted Ren against Eric and got her to sign that he was the ringleader of this cell. Now, the FBI called this group, they said that they were leading members of the Earth Liberation Front. Turns out that the first Earth Liberation Front arrests were Food Not Bombs activists in Long Island, New York. Connor Cash was picked up in 2001 and charged with burning down some model homes in a development. Turned out he didn't do it, he had nothing to do with it, and after a lengthy trial, eventually he was acquitted. His family sadly lost their home, and as a result, because they had to put it up to raise the money.
For the legal fees.
Yeah. Then the next person that became an important Ashcroft did a nationwide campaign to try to promote Patriot 2 after the Patriot Act came in. And they pointed out that Food Not Bombs activists were living in Orange County, California, and they accused a guy by the name of Josh Connell of burning some SUVs and spray painting ELF on a wall near that. He was held for a while. Eventually, a person that actually did the damage came forward, and so they had to release him, and he was given $100,000 as a settlement, told us leave town, don't talk about it. And the Orange County Sheriff's Department gave him 20 grand. So that was the next wave, and then there was, so it just kept building and building. In 2004, I was supposed to go to this gathering. We were going to have a world gathering in New York City. We worked really hard for over a year, but just before it happened, there was a fight between the people that proposed the gathering in Richmond, Virginia, Food Not Bombs, and the Manhattan chapter. And so that turned out, we later on got documents showing that those two chapters were infiltrated, and it was actually infiltrators fighting each other.
Well, you know, this is an interesting thing because Oakland right now is talking about the Black Box.
Black Bloc, which is infiltrated.
Right.
So the Black Bloc was the first one that I'm aware of in the United States was at a Food Not Bombs gathering in '92 in San Francisco during the Columbus Day events. That was sort of one of the advent of a Black Bloc in the United States, and I knew a bunch of the people in that. I've ever since then been advocating that people not get in the Black Bloc because they get heavily infiltrated. So it turned out in the Twitter feeds on the Oakland arrest of the over 400 people arrested there, a bunch of them were Food Not Bombs kids. I've been spending the last week trying to get Food Not Bombs kids out of jail. It turned out that there was agent provocateurs that were in the Black Bloc. They were also in. There's also a connection you'll see in the crime think convergences and stuff, and that's what happened in Oakland too. The crime think got heavily infiltrated by the FBI. And even in Seattle, if you look back at the beginning, I helped organize around Seattle I started in 1996, organized a tour which happened in '97, advocating that we blockade the WTO if it ever comes to North America. A year after the Unfree Trade Tour, it came to Seattle. Well, it turned out one of the main members on the Unfree Trade Tour was this guy named Manolo, who happened to end up, later on discovered he was in the Interpol in Europe. He was supposed to be an anti-globalization activist from Europe, and all this really crazy stuff went down during that time. And on that trip, I actually was at the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee twice on that tour, and the second time, this woman, Kathleen, was shutting the place down. And that's how I ended up moving to Lawrence to save the Peltier Defense Committee, is because on the tour returning back west, I happened to witness this crazy thing. Well, it turned out that same day, the Kansas City Star had an article about this ETA attack, this Basque attack on the Gary Museum in Spain, this art museum, and the guy that was with us was all happy about it. Well, a couple years later, I find out that he had infiltrated that organization. That's why he was happy, because his information worked, and they were able to stop this attack and grab these people. But so he's on my tour, and he was trashing my tour. It turned out behind the scenes, emailing people saying they hadn't eaten in 5 days, 10 days, 20 days. Of course, we're having huge Food Not Bombs meals everywhere. It was a very, and also at the Lawrence, at the Peltier Defense Committee, for instance, on the first stop on the way across the United States, going east, there was an insurance person came the first night at 1 o'clock in the morning in Lawrence, Kansas, and had to measure the ceilings of the Peltier Defense Committee office. The next night, a UPS driver arrived at about 1:30, got us up so that we could sign for a package, and they wouldn't let anybody sign for the package except for this activist friend of mine named Seth. He signed it, but he didn't have a last name. He refused to sign the last name on it, and they got into an argument with the UPS dude. But every single stop, in 60 different stops, we had people come at midnight to fix the water, or come at 1 o'clock to have us sign documents for an insurance adjuster or something. It was very weird. So then I found out that he was apparently Europe's most famous Interpol agent, and had infiltrated all these movements there and stuff. And people were told me that because they saw pictures of him in a scrapbook that I had on a literature table at a conference to plan protests.
So Keith, I guess Food Not Bombs is better than James Bond, huh?
Yeah, maybe so. It gets very crazy. You may have heard of the RNCA. The RNCA were all Food Not Bombs kids. Those 3 houses that were raided were the 3 Food Not Bombs cookhouses. Food Not Bombs was infiltrated in Minneapolis. Food Not Bombs was infiltrated starting August 31st of 2007. Yeah, when Ramsey County's undercover narcotics agent, calling herself Norma Jean, had joined Food Not Bombs and got involved in that.
Norma Jean joined the Food Not Bombs? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a great name. So it's anyway, there was 4 informants in Food Not Bombs in Minneapolis, and they would joke about bombing stuff, tape themselves joking about it. And then they were able to get a warrant to raid the Food Not Bombs houses. They arrested over 50 people and charged 8 people with the Minnesota Patriot Act.
Well, wasn't it last year that a bunch of Food Not Bombs people were arrested in Florida?
Yeah, last year there was 28 of us arrested sharing food in Orlando, Florida. While I was held for 17 days the second time. During those 17 days, the FBI organized, apparently did an investigation to see if I was connected to Anonymous, and somehow organizing cyber attacks around the world. And eventually they dropped the investigation supposedly. I don't know.
You know what? I never knew that feeding people, feeding the hungry, feeding the Occupy camps could be so incredibly controversial.
It is very controversial, yeah. And part of it is if Food Not Bombs helped organize many of the occupations. The people at Wall Street that were in the original crew that started organizing the General Assemblies, many of them were the local Food Not Bombs. And a bunch of the others that weren't active with Food Not Bombs at the time were like sort of alumni of Food Not Bombs. And that's part of the reason that we use the consensus to make decisions, is because there was a lot of Food Not Bombs kids and our friends that were holding the General Assemblies in Wall Street, and we brought out food all over the whole country, the whole world, even Budapest. Food Not Bombs in St. Petersburg, Russia, actually did a bunch of actions in solidarity with Occupy in the United States, including they snuck into the Aurora, which is the ship that fired the first shot in the Bolshevik Revolution, and they climbed on the anniversary of the revolution in October, which happened to be the 30th day of Occupy Wall Street. They climbed up on top, took the Russian flag down, and put up a Jolly Rogers that they had made. And they are now in a couple of Food Not Bombs kids who are in jail in St. Petersburg now for protesting against the stolen election by Putin and their work there.
So what can people do? How can they find you? How can they help you? What would you like people to do about the people that are still in jail, or feeding people, or getting involved?
Well, to find out most of the people that are on Green is the New Red.org, that website, almost all of those are Food Not Bombs prisoners. That's the easiest way to get a full list of all the Food Not Bombs prisoners.
Okay, say that.
So it's greenisthenewred.com, and that's Will Potter is involved, is the person that makes that website.
Okay.
Now there's so the people in Operation Backfire, those were Food Not Bombs kids, all of them. Then you have the people from the RNC. They, fortunately, most of them have cleared their cases. But also, if you visit foodnotbombs.net, you can email me and get more specific details. And I'm on foodnotbombs.net. There's going to be a detailed accounting of the 30-year history of surveillance against Food Not Bombs, and also tips and ideas on what to look for, but at the same time also how to keep from being in trouble and everything. Also on foodnotbombs.net we have a book called Hungry for Peace, and in that it's a whole section on what to look out for being to avoid ending up in prison as an accused terrorist. So Food Not Bombs has been, again, just to reiterate, we've been America's most hardcore terrorist group according to the military and the Justice Department and the State Department, Homeland Security. Our designation started in September of 1988, and many, like there has been a lot of these documentaries recently about activists going to prison and so on. Those activists are all Food Not Bombs kids, or the informants in those movies were also, they were in Food Not Bombs informing on us. And so, there's ways to keep out of prison, so people shouldn't be paranoid about it, but they should also know that the infiltration and disruption is ongoing. And after, on the 1st of January, that's when Obama, the day before, had signed the National Defense Authorization Act. And since then, there's been this speed up of all these campaigns to suppress dissent in the United States, including there's been a Department of Homeland Security's had these meetings to get local law enforcement to create intelligence operations against their local people. They've opened the airspace to drones for law enforcement.
I just posted an article. Yeah. They're doing that over in Arizona, wanting to start test flying over there. The whole Latin thing here in New Mexico, we've been fighting for over a year now.
Yeah, and they've got drones. LA just bought some drones. You got New York City's bought drones, DC's bought drones, Miami's bought drones.
Really?
Yeah, and they're also putting body scanners on public streets now. They started doing that this month. They had a meeting of all the chief of polices of the major cities with occupations at the White House 2 Wednesdays ago, where they declared us engaged in domestic radicalization. And they apparently on March 3rd, people that are involved in the Occupy movement can be declared domestic terrorists.
That's coming up here. And give us some verification of this, because I'm sure that there's people out there that are going to be let's say uncomfortable, maybe even frightened by what you're saying. And
if you go to foodnotbombs.net and go to new campaigns and actions, I have links to all these mainstream articles like Reuters and people like that describing this entire scenario. It's pretty chilling. So
it sounds like we'll be safer if we stick together, hey?
Yeah, we have to continue to push forward and to organize. There's also some people are trying to say that they're saying the economy's better right now, but it's I wouldn't say so. There's 1 in 2 Americans is suffering and trying to survive. You have also the threat of the war with Iran, which keeps getting worse and worse, and there's and also the a lot of discussion on the occupation movement getting really big as the weather gets warmer. So there's a lot of, that's why they've had these emergency meetings. The Aspen Institute has put out a white paper on how to coordinate intelligence operations against the American people. And then, of course, the military is allowed, as of March 3rd, to pick up anybody anywhere on Earth, including any American on U.S. soil, and detain them permanently without charges.
So we need to stay